Welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, where today we will discuss Chapter 4 of Freemasons for Dummies, Politics, Religion, and Freemasons. They don't mix.
Ladies and gentlemen, brethren all, welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, a casual conversation around Freemasonry. First, it's important to note that our thoughts and opinions are our own and do not reflect those of our Grand Lodge or respective craft or concordant bodies. Please connect with us and ask questions via our website at theworkingtoolspodcast.com.
Today on the Working Tools Podcast, we have three-quarters of our usual group. We have me. I'm Matt Appel. I'm a member of Mill Creek number 243 here in Montlake Terrace, Washington. We have Brother Craig Graham, who is a member of Kalmalka number 160 in, I want to say Stewart, but I know that's not right. What's the town name, sir? Vernon.
Yeah.
Sorry. Vernon, British Columbia, and David Colbeth from King Solomon 60 down in Auburn, Washington. Unfortunately, Steve couldn't be here. Something about spending time with his wife on their anniversary. I don't know, but we'll have to straighten out his priorities for next week. So yeah, today we're up to Chapter 4 in our discussion of Freemasons for Dummies, and it talks about. I will say my first thought was upon reading this that I thought that James Carville, who's mentioned in the first paragraph, is one of the secrets to his marital success is that he, who's famously on the left side of the political spectrum, and his wife, famously on the right side of the political spectrum, just don't discuss politics at home. And my first thought was, isn't he divorced? But apparently not. I looked it up, and he is not in fact divorced. So the story holds true. So yeah, he goes. Our brother Chris Hodap goes into a fair amount of discussion about politics and religion and Freemasonry, obviously. Did you guys have deeper thoughts than, isn't James Carville divorced? I hope so.
I like the way just after that comment he makes about Carville and Metallin, that he's got that section exploring the history of religion and the Masons, and he does a nice job right at the beginning of this chapter of kind of going through, in religious terms, kind of what Freemasonry is and is not, and what the composition of some of those things are. That there's no Masonic religion, there's no Masonic devil, there's no Masonic promise, and this one's important. There's no Masonic promise of salvation. It fails the test as in term of being a religion in that sense. But then he goes on to say, they're right on the after that, having said all that, Freemasonry is religious, and I think to look at that it's a pretty important step going into that chapter about how you can separate the concept of religion and the dogma of religion from Freemasonry, but it doesn't prevent it from being, at a basic and important level, a religious organization, if I'm sort of paraphrasing correctly.
I think understanding that difference, having the ability to accept and understand the difference between what's religious and what is religion is a important step for a man, for a person. If you can understand the differences, then I think you've taken a step down the path of Freemasonry, if you will. It's, while we are religious, we are not a religion.
Yeah,
and it seems contradictory, but
no, a little bit, but it also allows room for a very broad acceptance of beliefs, other than the extremes where you either have no belief at all, your classic atheism, or somebody that's dogmatic to the point where their beliefs will conflict with what the basic requirements of becoming a Mason are. You can, because I know a lot of my fellow brethren, and some of them very active, are people that have not, and they admit they have not spent a lot of time really considering what their own personal religious beliefs are. They may not attend churches. They have a very broad view of the greater being, and yet it's still as an, as an organization, we can accommodate that as long as as long as those people meet the very basic criteria that we require for joining under those terms. And kind of word salading a little bit there, but you know where I'm going with that.
What I wrote in my notes on that first page was religion and politics, not in lodge or not at all. And the example, as you cited, he indicates that they don't talk about it in their house, but it's not that they don't talk about it at all, just not when they're home and maybe together, and that's their focus is family and not the outside things happening. And so before I even started to read the chapter, my initial opinion was that, and kind of still is to some extent, that while Freemasons are charged essentially with not talking about politics and religion, I do believe it's in the focus of the fraternity and the relationship among the brothers, specifically in lodge room, extending maybe a little bit to the social aspect of Freemasonry, but then beyond that, you're free to be who you are and believe what you believe.
Yeah, I've definitely been in conversations in dinner before, after a meeting, or just in a social event for lodge where politics have come up, and I can tell you the leanings of several members of my lodge. And I personally don't find that to be a violation of the spirit of this. It's not, we were discussing things, and I don't find it like they weren't proselytizing. They weren't saying you got to vote for, so and so or else. And I guess I don't have a problem with having that discussion with my brothers, even though I think I'm on the opposite side of the political spectrum of many of them. But I don't have a problem with that. And again, same with religion. Like, I would expect that. I know a couple of members of my lodge are Jewish, and I would expect that if I were that I could go up to them and say, so what is Yom Kippur all about anyway? I don't understand this. And that they would be able to explain it to me without then saying, and you should become Jewish or else. And that we could have a factual discussion or an interesting discussion or comparative religion discussion without that violating the terms of the spirit of this. That's my opinion. I know there are other people who have a very different opinion. So,
and I agree with that. In that my instinct is that we're supposed to be essentially level-headed and open-minded about things, and we should be able to have potentially even somewhat contentious discussions. And while we may not come to agreement on everything, we should be able to at least be open-minded about the conversation and understanding the other person's position. And how else do we potentially learn about something? I might hear something controversial or different than what I believe and go, oh, why do I believe that? Why don't I believe that? And that formulates, I think, I believe one of the fundamental reasons for Freemasons to be able to come together. And so it sometimes pains me when I see a brother get emotional, if you will, about their position in lodge, or not lodge, in a discussionary setting. Something comes up and they just get animated. And I think, aren't we supposed to not do that? Aren't we supposed to maintain our passions so that we can have discussions? And I think we don't have to agree on it, but it would be nice to know the position of somebody else so that you can understand why they're reacting a certain way or why they have opinion about that.
So that's where you're talking about bringing in the idea of, one of the things we do as Freemasons is subdue the passions. Doesn't mean you can't have them. It's just that you learn how to maintain them. And I think the other thing, David, what the way you're describing that, it's a boundary of amity that you're drawing around everything as well, is that we're going to try and stay within that. We've always accepted that every person brings all of themselves into the lodge, good and bad, and negative opinions, positive opinions, whatever, and our convictions and what we learn in the fraternity is meant to somehow, it isn't meant to make any of that go away or control it or disperse it, but make us be able to discuss these things. And I think a larger, broader thing that might hang over all of this is that we don't, if we get political, if we get religious, that may very well happen. We don't let the organization as a whole drift into one of those or both of those categories. And that's happened in other places in the world where some grand jurisdictions, many of which are not recognized by any grand lodges that we would know or belong to, have either taken on a religious role or a non-religious role in the classic story of the Grand Orient of France, where they've allowed atheists to join, or one of the federal grand lodges in Mexico, which is apparently not recognized and quite political in its public stances.
That said, I have, in my travels throughout the jurisdiction in the last couple of years, I did visit a lodge where they had the picture of the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus on the wall, not in the lodge room, but in the dining area outside, and their chaplain prayed in Jesus' name. So there's all kinds of lodges. That would not be my personal choice, but when I was in their house, I didn't feel it appropriate for me to say, I think you're doing this right.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I agree with both of what both of you guys said. Yeah, we should both be able to have those discussions. I was going to say factual discussions, but I don't know. Yeah, sometimes when religious beliefs come in, fact is not always a part of it, but we should be able to have these discussions and not be at each other's throats and not be proselytizing and still be brothers at the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, like you mentioned earlier about you wouldn't expect if you had a question that you wanted to discuss with your Jewish brother about understanding his belief system, whether or not you agreed with it, you shouldn't be expected that you'll end up in an argument about it. And
right.
Yeah, which was interesting for me to read on that next section about. It was a really enlightening moment for me to understand. We were talking in the Blue Room about the next chapters that are coming up and having an interview with other orders, including the York Rite. And one of the things that have people in the York Rite, men in the York Rite often talk about, well, you have to be a Christian to be in the York Rite. And I guess I always just kind of assumed that and took it on face value. And then he was saying, well, but there's many Jewish members in the York Rite. And so how do they come to grips with that idea? And because you have to take an oath to defend the Christian religion. And he puts it out there that his brother said, well, of course, I defend the Christian religion to the death, just as I believe my Christian brothers would defend the Jewish religion to their death. And I thought, there it is. Right there. Why wouldn't we? Now, I guess, am I reading into it that you would defend any person's beliefs, religious, or only your brother's beliefs to the death? I mean, that there's a little bit of a...
You're getting onto the subject that I've actually been thinking about a fair amount lately, which is totally off topic for what we're discussing here. So
what? Don't go off topic, Matt. Come on.
We've never done that before. I was sitting in lodge this a few months ago now with somebody who said that they have the Masonic license plates on one of their cars, but not the other. And so they drive more politely when they drive the Masonic plate car than the other car. And that Masonry he was talking to a new prospective member. And he was saying that like Masonry had taught him that he should, drive better when he's wearing this. And I was thinking to myself, I didn't say it, but I almost did. I would like to think that Masonry would teach you to be a better person, whichever car you were driving. And there was somehow something else like that came up recently. I can't think of what it was, but it's whatever. I'm out to help someone. Oh, there was a person said they stopped to help a brother by the side of the road because they saw the license plate on their car and they were stopped and they had a flat tire or whatever it was. And so he stopped to help them. And I was thinking again, I would like to think that one would stop and help a fellow human being and that maybe Masonry would make you want to do that more. And then I thought to myself, I can't remember the last time I stopped when there was a car by the side of the road and asked them if they needed any help. So I should keep my yap shut.
Yeah. I've never had that thought cross my mind while I'm sitting here having a couple of guilty moments myself, about that kind of thing. Yeah, and I know. That's a bit of a that's a topic that all of us have to sort of look deeply inside of ourselves at, and how far the lessons of all of this have gone, and a moment of introspection there, I suppose.
Yeah, I guess for me, if it was a brother, of course, that would be kind of an automatic, it would seem, because I've taken an obligation to do that. If it's not a Mason, then you're right. I think, as we've talked about it ad nauseum, that while the lodge isn't necessarily what should be in the community making positivity, or it's the Masons. Hopefully the Freemasonry makes a better man, and then he goes out into the world and makes the world better. So yeah, to some extent I would agree. In that simple example, as I'm driving down the road, if I see somebody broken down and I look over and they have a cell phone in their hand and they're talking to somebody, I figure, okay, they're probably covered. But yeah, if we had a brother that helped somebody as they were going out of the lodge one night, there was somebody that needed some assistance, and he aided them and didn't ask him any questions. And it was an interesting, a neat story that we talked about in our own little, call it Shrink the Lodge, about that idea. And it was interesting. Yeah, are we, as they say in the closing charge, they have a claim upon our kind offices. So are we really? How much are we really looking or doing the things that we're supposed to be? We say we were going to do. So I don't know. Would I defend someone else's religion to the death? I don't know. There's a lot of death happening over religion still lately.
Yeah.
So yeah, nice way of bringing us back on topic there.
Sorry.
Good job. But I've actually wondered before. I don't think I would do this, but could we hold in lodge a discussion of the minimum wage? It's a factual thing. It's an economic issue. It's not necessarily a political thing, but that is a conversation that would rapidly become a discussion of politics, I think. I would like to think that as a bunch of level-headed, interested in the truth people, we could have that discussion in lodge, but I don't think I would try it.
I think you're right. I don't know where we would need to have a discussion about minimum wage in lodge, but I mean, as purely a thought exercise, you could take that to a lot of levels. If you're discussing business in a lodge that happens to do with something where perhaps the lodge is looking for a variance or a permit for something, and people in the lodge perhaps have strong opinions about the people that issue permits and variances, does that delve into politics to a negative degree? Especially if perhaps it's come up that perhaps somebody at City Hall is not particularly favorable towards Freemasons. We can cut this 1,000 ways, I suppose, but it's engaging those thought exercises every so often is worthwhile.
That'd definitely be something you'd have to say, hey, next month we're going to have a conversation about minimum wage to get any kind of education about it. Cause I don't know that I could have any factual or other than maybe knowing what it is. I'm not even sure I know what it is. I'd have to look it up on Google right now to know, because I think there's two different versions, right? There's Seattle and Washington, and everybody has a different minimum wage. It seems like federal has its own. I mean, and what is minimum wage supposed? I mean, but I guess you could do that about any topic, right? We should be able to formulate opinions about some of these things, whether it's minimum wage or whether it's how would we defend a religion?
It'd have to be interesting though to take a long look into the history of all of this to find out. I mean, Freemasonry we're looking at this with definitely a 21st century frame of reference, and yet Masonry was formed, when we're in that transition period from operative to speculative Freemasonry. It was formed at a time when you quite frankly, speaking publicly on religion or politics in certain places could get you in a lot of trouble. You could potentially be looking at a long prison sentence handed to you very arbitrarily, or you could be looking at sort of the ultimate form of silencing when somebody didn't like your opinion, and that was not. These things could happen. I mean, we look at the how, going back to our conversations with your brother from Washington there when we talked about the Morgan affair, how severe people, Freemasons and non-Freemasons, suffered in the political upheaval around all of that. It very nearly crippled the order on this continent. So it would be, I've always thought it would be interesting to be able to look at where the I mean, I don't think it's an outright prohibition, but it's sort of a protocol of the order that we don't discuss these things, how it came about. If it was just a gentleman's agreement, or if it was something a little more necessary, or where I'm going with that.
Yeah, I highlighted on the section learning from intolerance that I put, this is where it started. X marks the spot. In 1717, when the first Grand Lodge was formed in London, unusual rules were established. First, discussion of religion was prohibited. Meetings would not be disrupted. And then, as long as members believed in God, no one would question anyone's faith. And so there it is. And when the Grand Lodge of England was formed, those two rules were actually implemented. And that was according to his research, was to kind of stem the Civil War that was happening previous to that.
Yeah, so when the Grand Lodge was formed, those would be codifying sort of rules that already probably had existed for some time, and as you said, were against the background of what was going on in England at that time. And I think, there was that schism in Freemasonry that happened after this. This was sort of the first formation of the Grand Lodge of England, and then there was the remarriage a number of years after that.
I said the Blue Room too, that this chapter was a lot like one of the previous chapters where he talked about the history of Freemasons, basically, and it was like the begats in the Bible. That it just was, there was a lot of, he talked about it, and then he talked about it again, and then he talked about it again and again, and then mostly it was like, here's how it affected the English, here's how it affected the French, here's how it affected. It was the same story from a little bit different bent, and I thought, didn't I just read this? Didn't I just read this? And so there was a lot, it seemed like a lot of that happening. For me, it was a difficult chapter. I apologize.
No, it's okay. The four is as difficult of a chapter because you get into, there's segues in here on the Grand Orient and its shift towards a more humanistic approach to Freemason, and then the long and difficult and very complex relationship between Freemasonry and the Catholic Church.
Yeah. I did appreciate his next section. He talks about how essentially he summed up how power shifted or began to shift from the church, from the Roman Catholic Church, to the people, essentially because of literacy. I found it fascinating. I underlined the section and put the word read. Reading is power, right? Improved literacy is partially what led to the rise of the variety of the Protestant religions. Whether it's specific religions or not, it just was literacy in general. It doesn't have to be specific. It was religious literacy because of the printed Bible in multiple languages, but ultimately it was truly literacy. So the idea of reading and understanding and comprehension is what developed and led to schisms and other things.
Yeah, back when the peasants were kept in the dark, things were better.
So much easier, right?
Oh boy. Yeah, that's
I will say, so my personal story about Catholicism and Masonry, I was raised Catholic, and when I was in junior ROTC in high school, my got an award from the National Sojourners, which is a group of Masons who are veterans, and they did the presentation of the flag thing where they talk about the U.S. flag and here's to the red of it, the heroes bled for it, et cetera, et cetera. And
where's Gail Kenny when you need him? Sorry. Sorry.
And it's very moving, and it impressed itself on my 17-year-old brain. And I was at the award ceremony. I leaned over to my parents and I said, "Who are the Masons anyway?" And my parents said, "They don't like Catholics." And so now here I am, whatever it is, 35 years later, and well, we don't care. But
well, it's funny because one of the it's the second oldest of the of the three oldest jurisdictions, England, Ireland, and I'm not sure where the Irish fall in there somewhere. Pardon me. That's momentary.
We just lost all our Irish listeners. Yep.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I'm off the podcast. But the Grand Lodge of Ireland spans two sovereign nations, because it takes in the Northern Ireland and also the Republic of Ireland. Ireland is the Republic is a profoundly Catholic nation to this day, and yet the Grand Lodge over there has functioned admirably for centuries now, and is one of the oldest and most important jurisdictions that we have in Freemasonry. So it's again one of these things, like we could probably do about 6 or 7 episodes on Freemasonry and Catholicism, because there is a lot to unpack there, and so much of it is based around poorly understood history, and poorly understood and badly interpreted doctrines, papal bulls, reactions to those things, on and on and on for I think a better part of about 300 years now, isn't it?
Yeah, well,
Yep.
I really liked his pointing out the Pope Leo the 12th, his, I'm going to murder this, Humanum Genus papal, that where he talks about the Pope's worst acquisitions against the Freemasons. And as you read it, I didn't know it was coming on the next page, and I wrote in the margin, sounds like the United States of America. And on the next page, he says, sounds like a suspiciously like the instruction manual for the U.S. Constitution. And if you read that section, it's like, whoa, this is the meat of the U.S. Constitution, basically. Just, oh yeah, we're going to rebel, and here's the instructions.
Yeah, and it's actually, I think the Catholic Church, I probably should have kept my app shut. I think the Catholic Church just issued recently another ruling against Masonry and Catholicism being compatible. And that was at the request of I think it was a Filipino bishop who had said, I feel like there are Catholics, or there are Catholic Masons all over the place. Is that still okay? Is that okay or not? And the Vatican said, yeah, still no. So
Yeah, he talks about that several times, and there is so much about that relationship between the Catholic Church and religious ideals and control and Freemasonry. I think it really ultimately stems about control.
as with so many things.
I do like is just in that section on oil and water, the very last sentence. It's just, remember that the truth is literally millions of men over the centuries have members of Masonic lodges. And then he says, Masonry encourages its members to be better citizens, to seek answers to their religious needs in their own churches. And boy, isn't that true?
Yep.
Yeah.
And that seems like about as good a place as any to conclude our conversation for our first part of chapter 4 here of the Freemasons for Dummies book. I forgot the title of the book that we're discussing. I also would like to add, I don't think we've discussed this on the pod before, but we've actually topped 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. Woo.
Thank you to subscribers. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure that passing that arbitrary number is that important, but it's kind of cool to see. So
I think it used to be until there was millions and millions and millions of subscribers.
Joe Rogan, here we come.